Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something incredibly complex, definitely politically charged. It's a phenomenon that's shown this, frankly, frightening ability to jump from, anonymous message boards straight into the halls of power and even onto the streets of capital cities around the world. We're talking about QAnon.
Yeah, it's a big one and really necessary to unpack carefully. The sheer scope of this movement, I mean, it covers disinformation, political action, even, outright violence. It demands a really meticulous, evidence-based look.
Absolutely. And our sources for this deep dive reflect that. We've got security analyses from places like CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, reports from the Polaris Project on trafficking, plus political reporting, psychological assessments. It's a wide net.
It has to be.
So our mission today really is to cut through all the noise. We want to get some clarity here. We need to objectively analyze the core stories, the narratives of QAnon, track exactly how they got sort of mainstreamed, often by powerful political figures, maybe not using the jargon, but implicitly endorsing the themes.
Right. The implicit part is key.
And crucially, understand the actual, measurable, real-world harm this movement has caused. And that harm isn't just abstract. It includes physical violence, disrupting vital things like child welfare work, election security.
Yeah, the goal is to give you a really thorough, objective understanding of this global force. And to do that, we have to go back. We need to look at the movement's kind of its DNA. It didn't just pop up out of nowhere in 2017. There was, a dark blueprint already in place, one that set the stage for violence.
So let's start there, the foundations. QAnon, it really builds directly on what happened with the 2016 Pizzagate conspiracy theory. Pizzagate kind of set the scene, tapping into this deep paranoia that was, frankly, already simmering in American politics.
But it also pioneered the specific kind of story, the narrative structure, that QAnon would later take and, scale up globally.
Pizzagate. It seems almost bizarre now, but it was this flashpoint for an absolutely monstrous claim that high-ranking Democrats were running a satanic, cannibalistic child sex trafficking ring.
And the supposed headquarters, the non-existent basement of Comet Ping Pong, which is just a normal family-friendly pizza place in Washington, D.C.
It sounds completely outlandish, but the sources show it gained traction really fast in certain corners of the internet.
Yeah, it did.
And where this specific delusion came from is really key to understanding how these conspiracy theories work, isn't it? It started with the 2016 WikiLeaks dump of emails from John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chair at the time.
Right, and users on places like 4chan, Reddit, they grabbed onto these really vague phrases in the emails, things like cheese pizza.
Just normal shorthand, you'd think.
Exactly. But they didn't see it that way. They interpreted it as code, specifically code for child pornography or child trafficking.
And that process is critical, isn't it? It's like weaponizing ambiguity. You take a vague phrase, an odd word choice, and this community that's already looking for hidden meanings, they seize it, and their interpretation becomes absolute proof to them.
And this collective decoding, it gives them the sense of, special knowledge. They're the ones smart enough to see the real truth hidden underneath.
But Pizzagate wasn't just online talk. It spilled over, terrifyingly, into the real world, almost immediately. December 2016. A man named Edgar Madison Welch. He got an AR-15 assault rifle, a revolver, and drove all the way from North Carolina to this pizza place, his goal, to investigate these alleged crimes, to save the children.
He literally walked into the restaurant, pointed his weapons, even fired the rifle trying to open a locked door. He was looking for this supposed basement operation.
Which, of course, wasn't there.
Right. Didn't exist. He eventually left when he couldn't find anything, got arrested, sentenced to 4 years in prison. But what's really telling is what he said from jail. He actually regretted, and I quote, how he handled the situation.
Handled the situation.
Yeah. And admitted the intel on this wasn't 100%. Think about that. He accepted the core premise enough to commit, an act of domestic terrorism, but his regret was about the execution, not the underlying belief. That shows just how deep the radicalization went right from the start.
Pizzagate basically proved that this specific type of story, satanic elites, child trafficking, could push people to violence. It paved the way. So when QAnon showed up about a year later, October 2017...
it just sort of picked up where Pizzagate left off. It folded that specific horror into a much, much bigger, maybe more cohesive and certainly more appealing narrative.
Okay, so enter Q. This figure starts posting anonymously on the image board 4chan. The name was Q Clarence Patriot.
And the Q part is deliberate. It refers to this top secret clearance level in the U.S. Department of Energy. The implication was clear. This poster was a government insider, a white hat, someone with total access to classified info, maybe even the ear of President Trump himself.
And the core conspiracy, as you said, it's like Pizzagate on steroids. Q claimed the world, especially the U.S. government, is controlled by this secret cabal. Satan-worshipping pedophiles, the deep state, they run the Democratic Party, Hollywood, the media.
And in this story, Donald Trump wasn't just a politician. He was framed as a savior figure, elected supposedly by high-ranking military figures specifically to fight this cabal, all in secret.
It's a narrative that explains everything bad, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it also gives the followers this crucial, almost heroic role to play. Psychologically, that's a really powerful mix.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's get into the key jargon. Because these prophecies, these catchphrases, they really define the movement's identity, how it recruits. First, the big one, the storm.
A storm, yeah, that's the prophesied day of reckoning. This is supposedly when the deep state cabal gets exposed, arrested, indicted. The mythology talks about like over 100,000 sealed indictments just waiting to be unsealed.
Leading to mass arrests, military tribunals, maybe even executions at Guantanamo Bay.
That's the story.
And where did the name the storm come from? Because that links directly to political endorsement, doesn't it?
It does. It came from this really cryptic comment President Trump made in October 2017. He was at a White House military dinner, looked at the press, and said it was maybe the calm before the storm.
And when reporters asked what storm,
He just said, "You'll find out." QAnon followers, they jumped on that immediately. They saw it as a direct coded signal, validation from the highest authority figure in their whole mythology, confirming their imminent victory.
and after the storm comes.
The Great Awakening, that's the utopian age that follows, when everyone finally realizes QAnon was right all along and the world is cleansed of evil.
And the key organizing catchphrase, the one you see everywhere, is the mantra that builds the community. WWG, 1WGA.
Right. Where we go one, we go all. That sense of collective mission is incredibly powerful. And just as important is the movement's central instruction to followers. Do the research.
Which sounds reasonable on the surface, right? Independent thought.
Exactly, but doing the research in QAnon means something very specific. It means decoding Q's cryptic posts, these Q drops or breadcrumbs, these vague numbered messages Q posted online. But the research isn't objective at all. It's confirmation bias baked right into the system.
How so?
Because the very act of decoding, or baking the crumbs as they call it, it just reinforces the followers' belief that they've found the hidden truth. They feel like they earned it through their own effort, their own cleverness.
Now, what about Q himself, the identity? This figure started on 4chan, but then moved platforms, right? To 8chan, then 8chan. Why were those moves significant?
Well, 4chan is super anonymous, posts disappear quickly, hard to trace, but 8chan and later 8kun, which were run by Jim Watkins and his son, Ron Watkins, they had a different structure. They were built for, let's say, maximum free speech, minimal moderation. Basically, they became havens for extremist content.
And Ron Watkins, being the administrator's son, an moderator, he had a lot of control over the platform.
Exactly, which fueled a lot of speculation about who Q actually was.
So who was Q, or who were they? Was it really this high-level insider?
Well, forensic linguistic analysis, looking at the writing style of the early drops, suggests the first author might have been Paul Ferber. He was one of Q's earliest, most vocal promoters.
Okay.
But when the move to 8chan happened, the posting style changed quite a bit. And there's strong evidence suggesting that Ron Watkins likely took control of the account sometime in early 2018.
So the single, all-knowing government patriot with Q clearance probably wasn't a single person, and almost certainly not a high-ranking official. More like a revolving door of people deeply involved in that online forum world.
Precisely. But does that undermine the core belief for the followers? Often no.
How do they square that?
They rationalize it. They might believe Q needs protection, so if one white hat falls, another has to step up to continue the mission. It lets the movement survive failed predictions, keep the idea of Q's, almost divine wisdom intact, even if the human source changes.
That adaptability, that ability to survive contradictions, it brings us to maybe the most effective recruitment tool QAnon used: weaponizing compassion. It grew massively by tapping into a really genuine, very powerful human instinct, the desire to protect children.
Yeah, this is absolutely crucial. The disinformation about human trafficking, it serves as this key gateway narrative for radicalization. Security analysts really focus on this because it works so well.
How does it work exactly?
It takes that potent, compassionate response, the genuine horror we all feel at the idea of children being in danger, and it twists it. It redirects that altruism, turns it into this righteous anger that then justifies radical thinking, even condoning violence against the supposed villains.
And the sources are really clear on this. QAnon followers often don't see themselves as extremists or insurrectionists. They see themselves as heroes, literally protecting children from being snatched away and sold. That self-perception that they're fighting pure evil, that's what motivates the violence.
The psychological draw is huge. It gives a moral justification for extreme politics. If you believe your enemy isn't just someone you disagree with politically, but a Satan-worshipping child abuser, well then, almost any action against them seems permissible, even heroic, right?
And we saw a textbook example of this reaching critical mass, really pushing QAnon into the mainstream with the Wayfair conspiracy back in July 2020. This was a classic red-pilling moment, wasn't it? A shocking, simple story designed to pull skeptical people into the bigger conspiracy.
Exactly. The Wayfair conspiracy focused on the online furniture retailer. QAnon followers started claiming the company was selling certain items like storage cabinets for ridiculously high prices.
Like thousands of dollars for a basic cabinet.
Right. And these cabinets allegedly had children's names. The horrifying, completely false claim was that the expensive cabinets weren't the real product. They were a coded cover for a child sex trafficking scheme, and the children named were the actual product being sold.
That story just exploded online, went totally viral globally, and the fallout was huge, specifically because it directly harmed the legitimate anti-trafficking movement. The Polaris Project, they run the National Human Trafficking Hotline, they actually quantified the damage.
And this is where the analysis gets really chilling. Polaris calculated that the time their analysts, their responders, spent just dealing with false reports related only to the Wayfair conspiracy, the flood of tips, calls, messages,
Yeah.
that time alone could have been used to respond to an additional 42 real, legitimate trafficking cases.
Wow. 42 cases. That's staggering. The direct cost of this one piece of disinformation is measured in lost chances to help actual victims. It literally pulled resources away from real rescue efforts.
And it went further. QAnon followers systematically started co-opting legitimate social causes. They hijacked hashtags like #SaveTheChildren, #EndHumanTrafficking. They flooded them with QAnon content.
Making it impossible for people genuinely concerned about trafficking to find good information or real charities.
Exactly. It got so bad that major child welfare groups like Save the Children had to put out public statements saying, we have nothing to do with this movement. Platforms like Facebook, Instagram, they had to try and redirect searches for those hashtags back to legitimate groups. It just shows how successful QAnon was at using a real issue as a kind of shield.
And this strategy also led to something analysts call pastel QAnon, right?
Yes. That refers to a specific set of techniques, a certain aesthetic, aimed at recruiting women who might not normally be drawn to the sort of rougher edges of 4chan political extremism.
So less about the deep state conspiracies and more aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
How did they tailor the language?
Precisely. They use the look and feel of social media influencers, think clean graphics, soft pastel colors, and very emotionally resonant language, often focused on maternal concern, protecting children. They frame the QAnon beliefs not through, military tribunals and complex plots, but through that really accessible gateway issue, child sex trafficking.
The pitch being basically, you care about children, don't you? Well, we know about this hidden crisis and how to stop it.
Exactly. And it worked. These groups attracted a more politically diverse audience, often younger, overwhelmingly female, including people who maybe didn't buy the whole Q thing, but just wanted to raise awareness about trafficking. And in doing so, ended up accidentally spreading the conspiracy itself.
Now, QAnon's massive growth, it didn't happen in a vacuum. The sources really emphasized that the COVID-19 pandemic created this kind of perfect storm for radicalization. Global anxiety was through the roof. People were stuck at home, online, constantly, often isolated.
And you had massive politically charged opposition to government health measures like lockdowns and masks.
Yeah.
The crisis gave QAnon instant relevance, new narratives to weave in. Early COVID theories claimed the virus was a bioweapon made by the deep state, maybe to swing the 2020 election, or, famously, to implant microchips through vaccines, often linked to Bill Gates or Dr. Fauci.
So QAnon just absorbed it all.
It quickly intertwined with the anti-lockdown movements, the anti-vaccine movements, all over the world. It gave QAnon common cause with millions of potential new recruits who were already distrustful of authorities.
Which brings up an interesting contrast. While QAnon was using the crisis for these wild conspiracies, mainstream politics had its own kind of toxicity around crisis management too, right? It's important to distinguish between the conspiracy-driven stuff and just, well, conventional partisan maneuvering.
Absolutely. And a really good example of that conventional but still quite toxic political maneuvering happened in the UK in December 2020. It was all about the Christmas lockdown rules.
Right. The Labour leader, Keir Starmer, accused the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, of basically ignoring medical advice. Johnson was planning this 5-day easing of restrictions, letting 3 households mix for Christmas.
And Johnson's response, which really shows the political calculation involved, was to accuse Starmer of wanting to cancel Christmas. He framed it as not wanting to criminalize people's long-made plans. He pushed for personal responsibility instead of tighter rules.
Even though medical experts were sounding the alarm.
Yeah, Starmer pointed to this joint editorial from the British Medical Journal and the Health Service Journal. They called the plan rash, said it could cost many lives. So you see the tension. On one hand, QAnon is spinning tales of microchips. On the other, you have mainstream politicians arguably choosing political expediency, avoiding the canceled Christmas headline over clear medical advice.
It highlights how volatile that crisis environment was, even if the reasons were totally different. Both scenarios show a breakdown of trust or responsible decision-making, just manifested in different ways.
Exactly.
Okay, let's shift back to the U.S. context. Maybe the most critical finding from the research is how QAnon went from being this fringe online thing to a genuinely powerful political movement. And this wasn't accidental. It relied on what the security experts call a cyclical mainstreaming process.
Yeah, and understanding this cycle is really important. Basically, it means that extreme fringe ideas get normalized when they're picked up, repeated, or even just implicitly endorsed by powerful mainstream figures, especially political elites.
So a politician mentions something, even subtly.
And suddenly, that fringe idea gains credibility among their followers. Those followers then amplify it further, talk about it more, share it online. This completes the cycle, making the extreme view seem more normal, more acceptable for the next political discussion.
And the data shows this cycle really worked for QAnon. There was a survey, February 2021, that found 21% of U.S. adults actually self-identified as QAnon believers.
Which is significant in itself. But maybe even more telling is this. 41% of U.S. adults said they believe that elites, politicians, or celebrities are involved in global pedophilia rings.
41%, wow.
Yeah, that 41% shows the underlying vulnerability QAnon exploited. It points to this massive pre-existing loss of trust, a readiness to believe the core premise that secret, evil forces are running things, even among people who might dismiss the specific Q label itself.
And you can't really talk about this normalization without talking about the role of President Trump at the time. The sources document him amplifying QAnon messages, retweeting or mentioning accounts linked to the movement over 315 times during his presidency.
And these weren't exactly subtle nods. QAnon followers saw these retweets as clear signals, validation that he and Q were secretly working together against the cabal. Plus, when he was asked directly about the movement, he refused to denounce it, flat out.
Didn't just refuse, he actually praised the followers, said they were people who love our country. And remember that exchange where a reporter confronted him with the core theory that he was supposedly saving the world from a satanic cult of pedophiles and cannibals?
Yeah, his response was deflection. He said something like, well, I haven't heard that, but is that supposed to be a bad thing or a good thing? That constant refusal to condemn, sometimes even hinting at affirmation, it gave the movement this incredible, previously unimaginable legitimacy.
And that visibility pushed QAnon narratives right into the political mainstream, didn't it? Particularly within the U.S. Congress. Researchers look specifically at how members of Congress talked on X, formerly Twitter.
Yes, and they found a really significant presence and popularity of QAnon-adjacent narratives, overwhelmingly among Republican lawmakers, it has to be said.
Now, the analysis was nuanced, right? They generally weren't using the specific QAnon code words like Q-drop or WWG1WGA.
No, exactly. It was more about using the implicit core themes of the conspiracy. They were reframing their political opposition, talking about the deep state, but using QAnon's lens, its underlying logic.
Okay, let's break down the main themes they found. First, the child trafficking narrative. The study points to the promotion of the film Sound of Freedom by many Republican lawmakers as a prime example.
Right. Sound of Freedom. It's about a former government agent rescuing kids from traffickers. It's been widely called a QAnon-tinged thriller because it resonates so strongly with that conspiracist mindset.
Why did that film become such a political thing?
Because the narrative around the film fit perfectly with the QAnon worldview. The idea was that there's this vast hidden conspiracy of child trafficking that the mainstream media and liberal elites are ignoring or even actively covering up. And the film's star, plus the real-life person he played, they've both publicly pushed QAnon theories, including really dark stuff about elites harvesting children's blood.
And Republican leadership actively promoted
But
it.
they arranged special screenings, key figures attended, and you had politicians like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene explicitly using QAnon language, like the call to save the children, when promoting it. This widespread embrace basically signaled acceptance of the core QAnon idea, that a hidden cabal controls society and tries to suppress the truth.
Okay, theme 2. The deep state and anti-establishment narratives. This seems central.
Absolutely central to the Republican discourse analyzed, framing the Biden administration as illegitimate, authoritarian, part of some globalist conspiracy. Representative Mary Miller, for instance, explicitly used the term New World Order, a classic conspiracy theory term QAnon fully adopted when talking about the Biden government.
Then there's election fraud. How did QAnon narratives show up there in Congress?
The Republican endorsement of specific claims directly mirrored QAnon theories. Representatives Greene and Matt Gaetz pushed the conspiracy about Dominion voting systems switching votes from Trump to Biden. That specific claim was absolutely central to QAnon's belief that the deep state stole the election.
And other figures like Senator Ted Cruz.
Cruz challenged the election results, called for an audit commission. Now, he didn't necessarily use the QAnon words, but he often used that QAnon-style patriotic language, calling to take back our country, very similar to the rhetoric leading up to January 6th. And his initial hesitation to call the Capitol rioters terrorists before apologizing under pressure from conservative media, that really shows the influence that far-right flank, heavily fueled by these QAnon themes, had even on established politicians.
Right. And the final theme. COVID-19 cover-up claims. The QAnon idea that the virus was man-made, covered up by the deep state, that found fertile ground too.
Especially among political figures fighting against public health measures, Senator Rand Paul was really prominent here, spreading vaccine skepticism, pushing natural immunity, constantly challenging Dr. Anthony Fauci.
He accused Fauci directly of covering things up.
Explicitly accused him of covering up the virus's origins, the risks of gain-of-function research. Paul even wrote a book called Deception, The Great COVID Cover-Up, promoted another one called The Wuhan Cover-Up. Both pushed that man-made bioweapon narrative, which came straight out of the conspiracy world QAnon inhabited.
So you have all these narratives converging: child trafficking, deep state, stolen election, COVID cover-up, and they didn't just stay online or in political speeches. They led to real-world violence. The story of Ashley Babbitt, who was killed during the January 6th attack, is a really stark illustration of that radicalization path, isn't it? Drawn right from her social media.
Yeah, her radicalization was gradual, but it's clear in her posts. She started out late 2018, focused on local issues in her area, drug problems, homelessness, and yes, sex trafficking. She was tweeting about politicians needing to figure this shit out, but not initially linking it to some grand global plot.
So, genuine local frustrations at first. When did the shift happen? When did QAnon come in?
Well, in January 2019, she posted about the insane drug issue and sex trafficking issue and homeless issue, but linked it to immigration, demanding a border wall. The real turning point, the explicit adoption of the ideology, seems to be February 15, 2020. That's when she tweeted, "We are all one," followed by the hashtags, hashtag WWG1WGA and hashtag Q.
So that's when she fully embraced the language, the identity.
Seems so. And from that point, she was really susceptible to deeper radicalization.
And as 2020 went on, especially after the election, the lines blurred completely.
Completely. Her Twitter feed became this mix of human trafficking falsehoods, conspiracies about election fraud, intense anti-lockdown sentiment, aggressive anti-China stuff. It all merged together.
Her path really shows that narrative convergence perfectly, doesn't it? From local frustration through the emotional hook of trafficking into the political certainty QAnon offered, blaming the deep state for everything, including the stolen election.
Exactly. It wasn't just explaining the world anymore. It gave her a direct physical mission. That mix of issues culminated in her decision to go to the Save America rally and join the march on the Capitol on January 6th.
The journey of people like Ashley Babbitt really underlines why QAnon isn't just seen as some political quirk. It's viewed as a serious security threat. I mean, the FBI flagged the QAnon conspiracy theory as a domestic terror threat way back in May
Me too.
2019.
They did. Their assessment concluded that these kinds of conspiracy theories are very likely to motivate people towards criminal acts or even violent acts.
And that potential for violence wasn't just theoretical, it played out repeatedly, even before the huge event of January 6th. There's a clear pattern of QAnon beliefs leading directly to violence or planned terrorism by individuals who think they're soldiers in the storm.
Absolutely.
Let's just quickly recap some key incidents that really confirm that FBI assessment. Matthew Philip Wright, June 2018.
Right. He was an active QAnon follower. Drove an armored vehicle onto that bridge near the Hoover Dam, caused a huge standoff. He was demanding the release of some OIG report that QAnon believers thought would expose the deep state.
And he was heavily armed.
Arrested with over 900 rounds of ammo, got nearly 8 years in prison for making terroristic threats. And importantly, it was directly tied to a Q prophecy that didn't come true.
Then, Anthony Camello in 2019.
Camello shot and killed a Gambino crime family boss in New York. He showed up in court with QAnon symbols written on his hand. His belief. The victim was part of the deep state working against Trump. Again, framing targeted violence as some kind of patriotic duty against the cabal.
And Jessica Prim in 2020.
Prim live-streamed her cross-country trip with a stash of knives. Her stated goal was to take out Joe Biden, who was then the presidential candidate. These aren't isolated incidents. They show the movement creates this environment where individuals feel not just permitted, but mandated, maybe even divinely inspired, to commit violence for the cause.
And of course, the most visible manifestation was January 6th, 2021. The sources say at least 66 known QAnon followers were among those arrested for the Capitol insurrection. People like Jacob Chansley, the QAnon shaman, became global symbols of the movement's ability to mobilize large numbers for real-world violence, all driven by the false belief that the election had to be overturned by force.
And even after major social media platforms tried to crack down, tried to deplatform QAnon content, the threat didn't just disappear. Instead, we saw white supremacist and other violent far-right groups actively starting to use human trafficking disinformation as a recruitment tool.
Specifically targeting disillusioned QAnon followers.
Yes. Especially those moving on to encrypted platforms like Telegram after being kicked off mainstream sites. They use the exact same emotionally charged language talking about Hollywood as a den of parasites feasting on the blood of children.
Why that specific language?
It's designed to hook those QAnon followers who still deeply believe the child trafficking part, but maybe feel let down because the storm never arrived. Q's predictions failed. It draws them into more structured, often more overtly violent far-right organizations.
It really shows QAnon acting as this dangerous intersection, doesn't it? Where trafficking lies, anti-government extremism, and white supremacist ideas all meet and feed off each other.
Precisely. The goal is to scoop up those ideologically committed but maybe directionless followers.
Now, shifting focus slightly, this isn't just a U.S. problem. QAnon became a fundamentally transnational threat. We see the same patterns playing out globally. Anti-government feelings, conspiracy theories spreading like wildfire, social media being misused, all triggering violence or attempts at insurrection, often using a similar digital playbook rooted in QAnon's basic structure.
Germany is a key example. The movement gained traction there really quickly. In August 2020, you had the anti-lockdown Querdenken movement, that means lateral thinking, and it rapidly became saturated with QAnon narratives and other far-right ideas.
The Querdenken protests started peacefully against COVID rules, but then they were influenced by a more extreme group, the Reichsbürger, the Reichscitizens movement. What's their deal?
The Reichsbürgers are explicitly anti-government. They believe today's Federal Republic of Germany is illegitimate, basically an allied puppet state, and that the old German Empire technically still exists. Their goal is to reject all state authority taxes, courts, police. They often get involved in paramilitary stuff.
So you mix that ideology with QAnon's storm is coming narrative.
You get an explosive combination, and it culminated in rioters actually storming the Reichstag building, the parliament, in Berlin. They had hate symbols, old imperial flags shouting, "Merkel must go," clearly anti-government, anti-democratic, echoing exactly what we saw in the U.S.
And critically, this Kurdigan movement got political backing.
Yes, the Alternative for Deutschland Party, the AfD, which is a far-right opposition party in Germany, they gave the movement public support, media attention, political legitimacy. It helped Querdenken grow, and become more mainstream. It's that same cyclical mainstreaming process we talked about, just happening in Germany.
And we saw parallels in Canada, too.
Definitely. July 2020, an armed QAnon follower drove his truck right through the gates of Rideau Hall, where the Prime Minister lives. His plan: to arrest Justin Trudeau over COVID rules and gun laws. He believed Trudeau was part of the global cabal.
And the movement spread there through some unique local figures as well.
Yeah, figures who adapted QAnon ideas for a Canadian audience, like Ramana Didulo. She's a woman born in the Philippines living in Canada who declared herself the rightful queen of Canada. She built this cult-like following using QAnon themes mixed with sovereign citizen ideas.
Can you explain the sovereign citizen part? How does that fit?
Sovereign citizen ideology basically says that the current government, its laws, its currency, they're all illegitimate. Followers believe they are sovereign, not subject to government control. So Didulo mixed that with QAnon, claiming she was installed by the military to replace the corrupt deep state government.
And she issued decrees.
Yeah, these fictional orders to her followers, telling them to stop paying bills, even try to arrest police officers. Researchers called her one of the most dangerous QAnon influencers in Canada because her network was extensive and she was explicitly calling for anti-government actions, sometimes violent ones.
And finally, Brazil. A very recent, very strong example of the U.S. playbook going global. The invasion of government buildings in Brasilia, January 2023, by pro-Bolsonaro rioters. It looked incredibly similar to January 6th.
The similarities were striking. Just like in the U.S., it was fueled by relentless conspiracy theories about election fraud specifically, false claims that the electronic voting machines were rigged, that the election was stolen.
Coupled with intense social media mobilization.
Absolutely, especially on platforms like Telegram. They used a shared digital playbook, how to communicate, coordinate, spread viral images, issue calls to action. It was very organized online.
And the goal was the same. Stop the democratic transfer of power, keep the outgoing leader in charge.
Exactly the same anti-democratic goal we saw among QAnon adherents at the U.S. Capitol. This whole wave of transnational insurrections really proves that the underlying conspiracy engine, often built on QAnon's structure, its core themes of a hidden cabal, it's consistent across borders.
So, pulling all this together, the story of QAnon is really one of evolution, isn't it? How a fringe internet group managed to become this widespread global political force and, frankly, a security threat.
Yeah, and it did it through a combination of things. Weaponizing that really emotional issue of child trafficking as the gateway, leveraging the instability and anxiety of the COVID crisis, and crucially, achieving mainstream political normalization thanks to elite discourse and political amplification in several countries.
And the internet, social media, they were the essential amplifier through all of this, facilitating the spread across borders, helping turn maybe good intentions, like protecting children, into justification for violence.
And the sources make it clear that tackling this isn't just about banning accounts or debunking individual lies. It needs a much broader, multi-layered response.
Okay, so on the policy side, what do the recommendations focus on? Mostly accountability and transparency, it seems.
Right. Policymakers need to forcefully, publicly condemn these conspiracy theories and the people who amplify them. That bipartisan resolution the U.S. House passed back in October 2020, condemning QAnon, that was important. It sent a signal that this stuff shouldn't be tolerated by either side, and it specifically called out the damage done to the real anti-trafficking movement.
There's also a need for more collaboration.
Definitely. Rigorous, multidisciplinary collaboration. Governments, NGOs like Polaris doing the on-the-ground work, academics studying the phenomenon, local law enforcement. They all need to work together systematically to assess the threats, figure out how to mitigate them, and importantly, counter-messaging needs to be coordinated, evidence-based, maybe even focus on pre-monking, getting ahead of the narratives before they take hold.
And what about fighting the disinformation itself?
Building better relationships with the tech sector is key, not just for content moderation, but maybe supporting proactive counter-messaging too. We need to amplify credible voices, support independent fact-checking groups, especially ones that can hold political leaders accountable when they spread fear or lies for political gain.
Ultimately, though, the analysis seems to circle back to something deeper, doesn't it? This fundamental issue identified in the security studies, the growing loss of trust in the democratic social contract itself.
Yeah, that implicit agreement where citizens trust governments to rule legitimately in return for protection, stability, a fair hearing for grievances.
And when that trust erodes, when you have, like, nearly half the population willing to believe secret satanic cabals are running things, it creates an opening, doesn't it, For authoritarian leaders, strong men, because people lose faith that the normal democratic process can actually keep them safe or solve real problems, whether it's trafficking or economic hardship.
Exactly. If authoritarian leaders and conspiracy theories thrive on instability and distrust, then maybe the final provocative thought to leave everyone with is this. The fight against QAnon and whatever comes next, it might not primarily be about just debunking the lies. It might be about actively restoring belief in the democratic institutions themselves.
So the question becomes, what concrete steps can you, the listener, take
Hmm.
in your own community and how you talk about issues, maybe in local political engagement? What steps can you take to actually rebuild and strengthen that fragile belief in the legitimacy of the democratic process? Because that's what ultimately starves the conspiracy engine of its fuel,
It's a profound challenge for sure.
a necessary one. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.